Welcome to the special bonus interview leading up to our first ever ENGAGE Masterclass on November 9th. All about cultivating an active volunteer ministry. I'm Jeanette Yates. I'm the community manager at Texton Church and for the ENGAGE conferences. And I'm so glad you are taking the time to tune in and invest in your church. I am sure that you know that volunteers are the backbone of your church, the hands and feet of Jesus in your community. Still, if you serve in ministry, you know that finding, keeping, and creating a healthy, thriving team is complex and can even feel impossible. We are just a week out from the ENGAGE Volunteer Masterclass, and to prepare you for it and give a glimpse at to what to expect, we invited Jason Young, my good friend and the co-author of the book, Volunteer Effect. He is the former director of guest experience at Buckhead Church and North Point Ministries. He now coaches churches and companies around the country, helping them with personal leadership, building healthy teams, and creating remarkable guest experiences. Welcome, Jason. We are so happy to have you here.
Hey, thank you. Good to be here.
Oh my goodness. I'm so happy to have you. You know, I'm a big fan of you and Jonathan Malm's books. I've read all of them, really enjoyed the Comeback Effect, and am so enjoying. I've read the Volunteer Effect once. I'm now listening to it again. Really love it. And I'm so thankful that you are here to give us a little insight into what creates a healthy volunteer ministry. But before we get started, you may not know this about us, Jason, but here at Texton Church, we love a giveaway or two or three.
Come on.
So during today's interview, we're actually going to be giving away 3 copies of the book, The Volunteer Effect. So everyone who's watching, you have an opportunity to win one of these copies. So here's how we're going to do it. Everyone put in the comments on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about church volunteer ministry? How do you feel about your specific church? Not in general, your specific church's volunteer ministry on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being 10 being woo woo, we've got this covered. Let us know 1 to 10 how you feel about your church's volunteer ministry, and let us know why you feel that way. And we will randomly pick someone to win, and our team will reach out to you if you win. I mean, that's so exciting. I can't wait.
Yes. We want to make sure you put a number related to your church, not the church down the street.
Right. I just wanted to clarify that. After I read that, I was like, I need to make sure we say yes, because, that could be an issue. Okay.
True.
So we're going to dive right in. In the book, The Volunteer Effect, you and co-author Jonathan Malm discuss how to find, keep, and motivate volunteers. But before we dive into some of the practical stuff that you teach us in that book, I want to hear what prompted you and Jonathan to write this book in the first place.
Pain. I mean, seriously, all of the stuff that we write is really birthed out of a struggle or a pain or an experience, and not right away. It's something that's kind of been happening. And really that's where the volunteer effect came from. It's, oh gosh, I feel like this season I'm finding a lot of volunteers, and then there's this other season I'm not, and then there's this other season where I'm definitely not, and now I can't keep them. And like, what does training look like? So I think just this big picture of, all right, there's a pain, and then going through the experience and really kind of internalizing all of the things that we've talked about. I will say this book is not, hey, you should try this. You haven't, you should try this. It's not that. It's actually all of it has been tried many, many times over and over and over again. And then we've worked with other churches in trying it. And so really it's birthed out of pain and a need. And it's like, I think we could put this in a book, and hopefully it helps other churches just like it's helped us.
So as you were talking, it was making me think about the other book that you wrote with Jonathan, The Comeback Effect. And something that you talk about both in there and this book is the importance of creating a connection between the job, like the list of tasks that somebody needs to do as a volunteer, and the mission. And so, of course, in your Comeback Effect book, you were talking specifically about guest services. But can you talk a little bit more about that and how, yes, we have to have someone who is, unlocking the doors or opening the doors or seating people or parking, helping in the parking. And we have job duties for them, but how does that relate to the mission, or how can churches turn that job duty list into an actual mission focused role for that volunteer?
Yeah, there's so many times, and I've been guilty of this too, that we tend to invite people to a function and we need them to do these tasks. And yes, that is important. However, there's this other side that sometimes doesn't get talked about in the church, and it's really more the emotional side or the fulfillment side. And I think in the pressure of meeting people, or the pressure that your pastor or your supervisor is like, you don't have enough, or you internally feel like, oh my goodness, I don't have enough people. What do I need to do? And you just kind of like, any warm bodies will do. And I know we say that sarcastically, but unfortunately it happens all too often, versus taking a step back. And I ask myself this question: what if I didn't start with the church's needs? Because guess what? The church will always have needs. But what if I started with the person and their needs? And I might actually build my ask vastly different if I start from that. So for example, instead of, if you're in the parking lot and you're thinking, well, I need you to, set up cones, be in this particular position, park cars, and if you can't, wave. I don't know, I'm making it up. Versus thinking about, well, what are the needs of the volunteer, that potential volunteer? There's an element that they want to belong, which is an interesting word. And we use that in the church world a lot. I don't know if we know fully what it means, but I think it's where people are accepted. They feel seen. They feel listened to. There's an element of validation. And so I think starting there, and then when you look at the role, what if in the parking lot, you're not there to park cars, but you're there to guide people? Remember, on the other side of that windshield is a person. And so what if the experience, physical experience, because there's probably already been some kind of digital experience, but physical experience starts there. It starts with you, and it's kind. It's, you're not in a hurry. You're not park there. Hi. You're not rough. There's a reason that parking lot team members get the rap about being kind of like rough or aggressive. What if it didn't have to be that way? And so that's where you look at the right people, the right location, training them the right way. And again, you're helping people. You want the volunteer or you want the guest to feel seen. Well, guess what? You have to practice that on the front end so they know what that looks and feels like. Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so. And I'm processing, when we were doing some parking lot training, how we did a lot of digital, like, do this, not this kind of things with the, teaching them about what to actually do. But then we also said, and I got this from you, you and Jonathan, this idea of your job is not to park cars, it's to remove the barrier of them not knowing where to park their car. And so giving them more of a mission step of like, we're all, this whole team, all of us, from parking lot to pew, we're removing barriers. And so, so I do really love that. But I also love, and that's what's going to be happening at the ENGAGE Volunteer Masterclass, is we're focusing on the volunteer itself, not the job that they need to do. Yeah. So I really like that you brought that up. Like, what if we started with the person that we're actually asking to be a part of this? So,
well, and even Jeanette, even the language, I don't know if anybody caught this, but like, I tend not to use the word recruit. I tend to use the word invite.
Invite.
And people want to be invited to something that other people are going to be at, that they want to be around.
Right.
Recruiting feels like I will take all of y'all. I need tons of people. We got something big to do. Go, go, go. We train real fast. Versus, hey, I would really love to invite you to be part of, and you use certain language. Remember, language tells people how it's going to be. Language tells people the behaviors that they can expect from others, and language tells people how they themselves should behave. And so that's why language is really important, especially when you're inviting people to be part of something that you're leading.
I love that too. And there are some churches that don't even use the word volunteer. They have changed up that language as well for similar reasons. So after we've invited our volunteers and we've gotten them connected, sometimes we experience something else, which is, I was trying to come up with a way to explain this, and I made up a word. I don't know.
Yeah. But
we also experience, as church leaders, we experience volunteers, unvolunteering. Yeah. So they uninvite, they disconnect, they unvolunteer. And so this happens not because they don't want to help, but as you said, because they don't feel like they belong and feel known. And so you kind of mentioned it already, but I'd really love for you to talk about how you can let them know that they're making a difference, that they do belong, that they have been invited to something bigger, and here are the results of what they're doing. How can you do that as a leader?
Well, this is going to sound actually overly simple, but I guess I would start with the word intentional. If it's not intentionally part of your plan, you're not going to accidentally do it. And especially when the more and more volunteers that you add to your team. So I think there's an element of intentionality and having a plan. And it can be done in so many subtle ways that are already in the rhythm of what you do. For example, if you're walking around the church, maybe walk a little bit more slowly and look at your volunteers, ask them questions, talk to them, hang out. What are you seeing today? Solicit input, connect them to other people. Again, you're trying to shrink down maybe the more volunteers you have or the more roles that you have, shrinking the space down so people don't feel like it's a team of people that does stuff, but it's really more like it's about people. And so I think, introducing them to other people, giving them responsibility and authority, asking them where to contribute. Blake, who is out at crossings, and
we know Blake. We know Blake.
Yes. So Blake's a part of your world. He does a great job of putting faces up of leaders, and he wants to make sure that he, at certain periods of time or certain moments, engages with them. So for him, that's a way to jog his memory to do that. So if that is helpful to you, be like Blake. If it's putting something in your calendar, do that again. And it's not going to happen accidentally. It's going to take an intentional effort. And I think sometimes we think we need to, this might be helpful. I think sometimes churches are notorious. We want to programatize. We want to create this program.
Right.
And this isn't a program. This doesn't need to be. If it becomes programmatic, the personalization disappears. And so for you as the leader, do you see the people or do you just notice them? Do you engage with them and listen to them, or you just hear them? Do you really spend time with them, or do you use them? And your opinion on those questions isn't most valuable. It's what do people feel from you? And that feeling creates this, what? Jason wants me to be here. Blake wants me to be here. Jeanette wants me to be here. And they begin to pass that on and mirror that to other people. Remember, they are going to reproduce what they experience. So.
Yes. And that leads me into my next question. But before I go to my next question, it's time for another giveaway. We got to jump in. We interrupt this program for another giveaway. So if you would like another chance to win Jason's book, The Volunteer Effect, let us know in the comments one skill or trait you think is most important for a great volunteer. And again, our team will randomly choose a winner and reach out to you if you won. Okay. back to our interview. As you were talking and you were sharing about what Blake does to connect with his volunteers and to make them feel like they belong and they're making a difference, it reminded me of something that Marianne Sibley says often in her speaking. And I know you know her, so I was like, well, I'll throw this out there. But she talks about that volunteers are the mission, that they're not just like a means for you to fulfill a mission, although that certainly is part of it, but that they are the mission. And so I want you to just tell a little bit more about how you would, as a volunteer leader, how you can let them know that they're your mission, like, or practical things that you can do to minister to them or disciple them, things like that maybe we don't often think about because we just want to make sure they're in the right place at the right time doing the things right.
So I'm going to try to make sure this doesn't sound like an ADHD response, because there's a couple thoughts. One way to do that is to remind yourself. I have to tell myself this: they're not my volunteers, they're God's. And so when I think about that, I invite them differently, I onboard them differently, I train them differently, I coach them differently, pray for them differently, encourage them differently, so forth and so on. And so for me, the beginning influences the ongoing. And so, how do I think about them? If I'm possessive of them, I tell them what to do. I need them to help me meet a goal, so I look good to a supervisor. I need to, keep it buttoned up. Yes, there are tasks to get done. That's not what we're saying. But eventually, if we're not careful, it can eclipse, all of the heart of what we need to remember. So I was working with the church not long ago. It was a student ministry in particular. And I asked this student pastor, and they have thousands of students. I said, what is your number one ministry, like focus? And without batting an eye, he said, kind of like, Jason, what an idiotic question, said, students. And I said, eh. And he said, I'm in student ministry. I'm like, I know. And he said, so how is that the wrong answer? I'm like, well, maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, and it's not the wrong answer, but maybe there's a better answer. I said, what if you built a ministry and partnership and community around the people that are actually doing the ministry, your volunteers? What if that was the focal point of your ministry? Because you don't hang out with all these kids. You don't hang out with thousands of them, do you? He said, no. I said, but if you create a remarkable ministry, a healthy ministry for the people right in front of you, guess what you're giving them the permission to go do? Mirror what you have invested and created in them, and then they go do that for students. So really, your ministry actually becomes a lot deeper, better, bigger, healthier when you choose to focus on your volunteers. So the last thing I'll say is this. The moment you begin to see volunteers as a way to help you get stuff done is really a dangerous direction that you're heading, because people will feel that, and you will begin to see your numbers die off. Attitudes will change. Disengagement from you will occur. Actually, a dissatisfaction in you will begin. But when you realize that the people in front of you, your volunteers, that is your main ministry. They go do the other elements in that ministry. But if you do that really well and you invest in them and you remember they're yours, and on and on, what we've already talked about, you might be really surprised how your ministry really begins to take off. And I suspect, last thing, I promise, I suspect that some of you watching and listening to this today, you started off there. You were there, but something happened, and it could be you became more of a selfish leader. You got really desperate. You started losing volunteers, so you started kind of holding them a little bit more tightly and controlled. You really, you would never say this publicly, but you see them as a way to help you get stuff done because it makes you look good. Whatever the reason is, and however you've gotten to where you are today, what if today was a little bit of a refresh and a reset for you, that you could go back to a moment that you saw volunteers as like, we get to do this together, and let them see that and hear that and feel that from you. And you might just be amazed at how more powerful your ministry becomes when you choose to focus on your main ministry, and it's the people on your team.
You're preaching, Jason. You're getting me all. That was good.
That's an offering bucket.
I was going to say that was, woo. Well, okay. So we're wrapping up our time together today, but I do have a couple of more little things to throw out at you. This one can be, we can do rapid fire on this one if you can. I don't know.
I'll try.
Let's go. So, okay. We're listening to this. It's the middle of the week. Sunday's coming, or our next opportunity for our volunteer, seeing our volunteers is coming. What are practical things? What are 3 practical things that somebody could do today if they're struggling in their volunteer ministry and they want to make a change? What are 3 things they could do in the next few days?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing is to give yourself permission not to change all this stuff. It's too overwhelming, and you didn't get here overnight, and you're not going to get better overnight. So number one, give yourself a break. And leading volunteers can be very difficult. I know you want to do it right. And I think that's why we're here having this conversation, to be helpful and come alongside, and you're not alone trying to figure this out, because you're not the only one that is kind of figuring this thing out. But I would say give yourself permission to just take a deep breath. One thing, the second thing I would focus on is, what if who are 2 or 3 people you could reach out to on your team this week? Volunteers.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about you. Hey, I noticed something this past week that you did. Thank you. Maybe writing somebody a note. And then the third thing, and it's a little related to that, is begin to have these conversations with people around you to assess, like, what are some things, like, what if we began to dream again? And again, you don't have to do all of this, but at least it's starting the conversation of what would it be like for us to kind of just refresh things just a little bit. So I don't know, that would be top of mind. I know some of you are like, well, I want to fix something and fix it all by Sunday. Don't worry about that. It's not going to happen.
I love that I asked for 3 things, and the first thing you said is, you don't have to do 3 things. You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Just focus on the next good thing, I think is something to do. All right. So
people instead of tasks.
Yes. And focus on focus on the next best thing, or just focus on the next person, right? Maybe not the best thing. Okay. So again, this has been a bonus training for, to get everybody pumped up about our volunteer masterclass, which is going to be training our church leaders. We've got Marianne Sibley, Muta Minway, and Ryan Keller. They're going to come on and train our church leaders about volunteer ministry. And so I want to ask you, why would someone need to take this time, want to take this time to invest in some training to learn how to invite, retain, encourage, and even when that time is done for that volunteer, offboard them and celebrate them well? Why is that so important?
Well, if you're a normal leader, we all need a little bit of insight or reframing, see the same situation from a different perspective. Maybe a word or sentence will trigger, kind of give us permission to dream again or to explore again. And so when you're a part of something like this, what you're really doing is you're saying, I don't know everything. So you kind of have that humility posture, and you're willing to listen and learn, because volunteer ministry today is different than it was a year ago, 2 years ago, and 3 years ago. And so if you're doing the same thing, you're probably going to be really, really, really frustrated. So when you're a part of something like this in a community of other people that are trying to figure it out too, you can listen and learn. And it may be the very thing that gives you that little spark that creates that fire that used to burn deep inside of you, but some reason got kind of just put out a little bit. So I would say, be humble, listen, learn, join the community. And what's something that you can pull out? Let it be a spark and let it create that fire inside of you, and go do it in your church.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. You have inspired me again. I feel like picking up my phone as soon as we get off of this interview and texting some of the people that I volunteer with at my church every week, and just let them know what a big impact they've made on me. So you've already made a difference. I hope some of you that are listening have also come away with something today. But before we wrap up, we've got one more opportunity for someone to win your book, Jason, The Volunteer Effect. And this will go, okay, so listen to so we've had 2 comment suggestions before. So now we're going to ask you, this will go to whoever is the first person who puts the date of the Engage Volunteer Masterclass in the comments. What? Yeah, so I mentioned it a couple times at the beginning. So hopefully you picked it up. I'm going to, of course, mention it here in a second. But Jason, thank you so much for sitting down with me today, taking this time. I appreciate you and all of the work that you and Jonathan have done for in creating the volunteer effect and sharing about volunteers. I know that work has meant a great deal to me, and I can't wait for us to share that with share that book with others. But more importantly, I'm just thankful that you came and gave some of your insights to our listeners today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to you and your team. Keep doing what you're doing. Do a great job.
Woot! Thank you, Jason. Okay, so if you haven't already, be sure to get your free ticket to the ENGAGE Masterclass next week on November 9th. We'll drop the link in to register in the comments. Remember, it's completely free. We also only have just scratched the surface with our discussion on volunteers here today with Jason, and you're going to learn much, much more next Wednesday at our Engage Volunteer Masterclass. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you will enjoy us next week. Engage Volunteer Masterclass, November 9th. Sign up in the comments. Bye.